everything indicates that the situation of these characters is going to get even more complicated. There was the Odebrecht case. We are still going to map out how this whole situation is. And another factor appeared here coming from the United States, that Ignacio hasn't been sleeping. He hasn't been sleeping. Because just imagine how many members of the Workers' Party will be brought together again in this investigation that the United States is going to push hard. Something that happened back in 2016. Fines that were negotiated in the United States. They excused themselves, saying, "We won't pay a fine in Brazil." The American justice system said, "Since you're paying a fine in Brazil, you don't need to pay one here." And there are a lot of people who, look, are going to get into a lot of trouble. Let me show you here. Hit the like button, smash that button because it helps the video get more engagement on the platform. And come join our family by subscribing to the channel. Imagine trying to explain to an American that the judge who is giving all the safe conducts to the Lava Jato criminals is the same judge who started that whole investigation back in 2019 with that article, "Friend of my father's friend." The Americans have the FBI, they have the CIA, they have several agencies that sometimes we don't even know exist. They have covert agencies. They're investigating all of this and bringing it cleanly to Trump's table to evaluate. Things are extremely complicated. And if you notice, all of this has been happening, right? After Hugo Carvajal's confession, declaring himself guilty of all the crimes he, Maduro, and the left-wing parties committed, according to a report by Record. Lula, Dilma, all of that. After he exposed this whole scheme, things got really complicated. Because obviously Hugo Carvajal, right? He wouldn't want to spend the rest of his days without, for example, seeing his family, children, wife, the people he lives with. And it's obvious that the Americans know he has much more to lose than to gain. There's no way not to. Sometimes it's negotiation. The fact is that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But depending on the deal, his situation could get a lot more comfortable. He's already in prison and he will stay there. And after he pleaded guilty, my friends, a lot of things started to happen, to come to light, and that's a fact. Yesterday, Michael Benz posted this here. You can't make this up. Brazil wants the former head of disinformation of the censorship court to be arrested while he's in Italy for having revealed the corruption in the court. Brazil says he's violating official secrecy by talking about the court's secret censorship work. So Michael Benz is that CIA agent who worked in the Trump administration in a previous term, right? He's been exposing several things happening in Brazil. Moraes ended up shooting himself in the foot. Because from the moment he calls on the Italian justice system and says that Taliaferro is revealing facts that are under seal, it says, he himself, indirectly, ends up admitting that the things Taliaferro has been exposing are true. Because if he points to it as a crime by Tagliaferro requesting extradition, and in Brazil's prisons, the fact that he's revealing information that Alexandre de Moraes says is sealed, he didn't say that it's false information, that it's disinformation or anything like that. He is basically proving everything that Taliaferro has been exposing. I don't think he considered that possibility. Now, the Italian justice system, guys, I was watching several famous influencers saying that in Italy, people who report wrongdoing are often even honored. They receive awards and cash prizes for reporting corruption and the schemes that happen there. Have you noticed that here in Brazil, the person who reports something goes to jail and the one who gets reported stays calm? It's surreal what happens here in Brazil, isn't it? Now just imagine the panic this guy must be feeling. The United States and Trump caught Lula by surprise, red-handed, and everyone is going to see it. This is the report from Conexão Política. Let's understand what's happening. The United States and Donald Trump caught Lula by surprise, red-handed. This is the interpretation circulating in the corridors of Brasilia among President Trump's allies, sources close to the White House. And allies of the Trump administration in Washington say that Lula could be put in a delicate situation if he decides to support the peace plan proposed by the United States to end the war between Israel and Hamas. Take a look. Their story is unraveling. Reports mention aides of Trumpy, the former president, and President Bolsonaro. To me, he's still the president. What are they assessing? Although the Brazilian left and sectors of the government are already showing support for the initiative, the plan exposes a costly and contradictory point. The American proposal includes, among other aspects, granting broad amnesty to members of Hamas who agree to coexist peacefully in the region, making this a central condition for pacification. In other words, Trump delivered a checkmate and I think a velvet glove slap as well. It was a message to Lula. He and Israel will grant amnesty to the Hamas militants. That's why. Who decide to have harmony, as they like this word, harmony between the powers, with Israel right there at the border. So if those guys decide, but that's not going to happen, Hamas, purists, evil, malicious, and unscrupulous people will eventually resort to violence. And then Israel will have no other choice but to eliminate those people, which is what they've already been doing with all those elements, friends of left-wing parties here in Brazil. But then came the crux, the heart of the matter. The physical therapist has already shown full support. Even that union stooge, Mauro Vieira, look, this proposal is acceptable. Amnesty for Hamas. There has to be amnesty for Hamas, man. These guys are supporting amnesty for Hamas. They fell right into Trump's trap. In Brazil, there are people who've never been to a police station. Check them out. The expectation, according to this group, is that Lula will align himself with Trump's proposal. Soon, the opposition will exploit the inconsistency to boost the argument that Brazil maintains a policy of persecuting internal opponents, while also granting a broad pardon to members of a group labeled extremist by several countries. Donald Trump announced on Monday a peace plan to end the war between Israel and Hamas, with the provision for the creation of a Palestinian state. The announcement was made alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who, according to Trump, accepted the terms of the proposal. The plan presented focuses on ending the war immediately, rescuing the hostages, and creating conditions for lasting Israeli security and Palestinian success. According to the plan, after Israel approves, Hamas will have 72 hours to release the living hostages and return the bodies it holds. During this period, military operations will be suspended and Israeli troops will gradually withdraw from the Gaza Strip. In return, Israel commits to releasing 250 prisoners sentenced to death and 1,700 detainees held after the October 7th attacks, in addition to returning 15 for each released hostage in this case. The proposal also includes amnesty for Hamas fighters who agree to coexist peacefully in the region. People leaving Palestine can do so safely. So now, what is Ignacio going to say about this agreement that Trump made? He's already there, all excited. His little friends are going to be released. His little friends will be able to leave the region in peace. And here, my friends, is the a tweet from Vinicius Carrion, which he ended up posting yesterday and exposed this whole amnesty issue here, right? I'm grabbing it here on the spot to show you, guys, it's absurd. He says, look at this here. The Supreme Federal Court opposes revising the amnesty law with a 7-2 vote. There is the amnesty law. They are trying to spread misinformation by saying it doesn't exist. When it ended in 2015, Peluso, then a justice, commented, if it's true that each people solves their historical problems based on their own culture, with their feelings, character, and history, Brazil chose harmony. The president of the Supreme Court also stated that a society that wants to fight its enemies with the same weapons, with the same tools, with the same feelings is doomed to historical failure. They admitted, Vinicius adds, see what then Supreme Federal Court President Cesar Peluso said about amnesty in Brazil. If every people addresses its historical issues through its own culture, character, and history, Brazil has chosen harmony. In other words, when it was their own purists, José Dirceu and so many others, José Genuino, who trained in Cuba in guerrilla tactics. José Dirceu is a member of the Cuban army, just so you have an idea. Cuban army member, everything was great then. Now with elderly people, gentlemen, ladies who have never committed a crime, no. That's not allowed, that's forbidden, it's a huge inconsistency. Now, what's really causing trouble is this fact right here. Adelex Goins said, a tsunami is coming for Lula and the Supreme Court ministers. Lula and several ministers didn't expect this. Trump has just made a decision that will leave a lot of people sleepless, and not even the most optimistic conservative could have expected this. Do you remember Operation Car Wash, which exposed the entire corruption scheme set up by Lula involving the diversion of billions to Lula's own coffers, and funding physical therapist campaigns? Odebrecht financed several campaigns of communist dictators in Latin America under Lula's direction. And part of these financial operations went through American banks and used American financial infrastructure. Odebrecht and its subsidiary Braskem signed a plea agreement with the United States Department of Justice, admitting that they paid bribes to finance public contracts in several countries. They agreed to pay $3.5 billion in global fines, United States, Brazil, and Switzerland, to settle corruption cases. This agreement was among the most significant transnational corruption cases under American anti-corruption law. It was the biggest corruption crime in the history of the United States. And the Brazilian company, the company of Lula, linked to Lula, was involved in all of this? It's absurd, isn't it? Information started circulating that the Department of Justice is reopening this case to find out under what conditions the negotiations were made by Obama. At the time, under Obama, it was the United States left, along with Odebrecht's lawyers and owners. In practice, it means saying that the nightmare for Lula and several Supreme Court justices may be coming in the form of a huge tsunami. And it's going to happen on the 7th. That's the deadline given for Obama's former secretary, the lawyer as well. A sort of Moraes over there who tried in every way to arrest and complicate the President of the United States. Today, Donald Trump. Explain. He has until the 7th now to explain things that he won't be able to explain. This case will be reopened. And all the people involved in this will come to light again. I think it was a clear message from Trump, especially for Lula, who was involved up to his neck. Basically, he was the boss of all of this. And notice that Odebrecht operated there in Venezuela and so on. Hugo Carvajal again, we mention him here. Everything is connected, one thing to another. Samuel Pancher said, the Department of Justice asked for details on Odebrecht's leniency deal with the United States government to determine if the American Department of Justice omitted or inconsistently applied policies. And this review could lead to the reopening of the Odebrecht case if omissions are proven. It's here. Guys, they never act without a reason. The situation is really complicated for Lula. Things are really heating up. We see this talk about sovereignty. Sovereignty here, sovereignty there. The truth is right here, isn't it? This is a fact. Want to watch the video?
Lula is Brazil's best president yet. He's saying the Americans want to invade a sovereign Brazil. You're right, Lula, I support you. Americans risk their lives and pay $10,000 to coyotes to cross into Brazil, often going hungry, to live our lives here. Working half the year to pay taxes and the other half for yourself. Buying this tractor, putting a tire on it, or fueling it up, all cost half in taxes. Half the cost of a vehicle is taxes, but Americans still want this experience. And when you don't pay the extremely expensive vehicle tax, the government comes, seizes it, puts it in the impound lot, leaves it burning in the sun, lets it deteriorate, and you still owe the government. That's what Americans want to experience in Brazil. They want to come here. That's right, Lula. Sovereignty has to be ours. We can't let these Americans live the life we have here. No. A minimum wage, that's not enough for many to afford medicine. In the United States, you can live on minimum wage, affording a car, house, food, and supporting your family. The currency holds value, right? And do Americans want to experience the life we have here? They're invading Brazil. That's not allowed. That's right. Lula, sovereignty. Oh, I forgot. Americans want our riches. They want our niobium, our gold, our diamonds, mercury. They want those things. No, we have to sell to Iran. We have to sell to Hamas. In Palestine, we have to sell this to China. Send the land to China to extract the diamonds. It can't be for the Americans, no. It has to be for them, for the Chinese, for those people there who are just such good folks.
Brazilian, right, my friends? Dealing with Brazilians. Yeah, Trump must know. The Americans are desperate. They're going to pay coyotes to get into Brazil. Man, the left is filthy, guys. It's filthy. Their narratives, right? Yeah. Only a leftist would believe all this nonsense. Share this video on WhatsApp, Telegram, and Facebook. Like and join our family. I'll return soon with more updates on the Pais e Filhos Fabiano Guiguet channel.